We had doubled our best revenue month. And I'm like, finally, we're not going to lose money, right? We were losing money at 300,000 for sure. We just, everyone bent over backwards, worked out these 120-hour weeks. We killed it this month. We doubled our revenue. Show me the profits. And guess what? We went even more negative.
No.
Even more negative. And I was like,
Ahoy, mateys! Today it be a good day, ye scurvy lads. We're going to be talking about the most important thing in real estate, which is ROI.
Dude,
Kris, tell us about the ROI behind real estate.
You're such a punk. I really feel like something really bad is happening right now, and we should report you to the authorities.
What? I thought that was the direction we're going today.
Yeah, so I've got a little bit of a swollen eye. And,
are you sure you don't want to talk to us about ROI?
No,
which is a pirate's favorite part of real estate.
I love ROI. It is my favorite.
Can you just give me one ROI?
ROI.
Matey.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so you're on camera. You're gonna have to explain the patch.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've got an eye patch.
You took an elbow?
I got an eye patch. I was just like, I don't know, what's it like to be Nick Fury? Like, that's got to be so cool.
Can I be Iron Man?
You can be Iron Man.
No, it just changed my mind. I want to be Spider-Man.
Yeah, my wife looked at me. I was stepping out the door. She said, "You can't go out with your eye looking like that. Like it's."
Can we see it for just a sec so everyone can see the damage? Yeah, it's just swollen.
Yeah. So, we wasted a whole minute of everyone's life on that thing.
Oh, but they enjoyed it. I promise you. You know what happened, Kris? In the moment, I made a decision.
Okay.
And I decided to start this podcast like a pirate. And sometimes, I don't know, what's better, a bad decision or no decision at all?
Yeah. Thank you. That was a great tee up for today's
conversation.
Was that a good setup?
I
like that. That worked really well. So I messaged Carson the other day. I'm like, man, you know what? I have made so many bad decisions. And then at some point I stopped and I started making more good decisions than bad decisions. And then at some point we're like on a streak for years now of just all these good decisions. And at some point, it's like, should I blame the economy on this? I'm like, I'll tell you what happened.
One of those years was COVID, so.
I was in my early 20s, and I was listening to Napoleon Hill on this old ancient recording of him, and he said that the cost of indecision far outweighs bad decision. And I took it to heart, and I'm like, wow. So being an action taker, a decision maker, even if you make the wrong decision, is more important than those people that just can't seem to make decisions. And it hit me with so much force. I just made a decision. You know what? If I'm 1,000 decisions away from being a millionaire, then I want to make those 1,000 decisions sooner, because a lot of people suffer from analysis paralysis, right? Mm-hmm. They analyze their problems. They don't analyze them, they analyze them. Like they get hyper-focused and they can't move on and they can't get over it. And we all know, you know what I'm talking about. You might be one of those. These are those blueprinters, right? It's that personality type in Myers-Briggs where they have to understand the sequence and the step of things, the blueprint, and sometimes they get lost. And they just can't get to making a decision. Those people, they can make really, really great people that work for you to like work through things, analyzing things. But how often do they go on to become really successful entrepreneurs? I haven't met very, very many of them, because the reality is there's way more decisions that a person needs to make than they're aware of to have the level of success that they're envisioning, that their dreams require. And I found it to be really, really true. I agree. I guess that's what I'm saying with Napoleon Hill. I believe that bad decision is better than indecision, because indecision, you can't get anywhere. And we're afraid of bad decisions,
Kris,
but there's something worse.
You're going to have to back this up, because I think a majority of people would disagree with you because they're terrified of bad decision. So is it real? Can you point to stuff in your life where making a decision was better than no decision at all?
So here's what I can tell you. If we were to zoom out and say 50,000 feet in the air,
yeah,
my first decade of being a business owner sucked.
Yeah.
School of Hard Knocks sucked. I had mentors along the way at times. Most of the time I didn't. And I was just trying to figure out how to do business. And I don't think a lot of people understand that in the game of business, that you have to know how to do many things well, not one thing.
It's like a lot
of people get sucked into business because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this product. And they fall in love with the product, or they fall in love with the service. The problem is they should have learned at some point, you're going to have to learn that you need to fall in love with your customer, not your own product, because you can be blinded by your own product and put yourself on the wrong path for a very, very long time. That's a lesson. Reading P&Ls, understanding how to convert accounting numbers into words and words into accounting, that's a lesson. Until you figure that one out, you'll probably struggle to grow. No one told me that, right? Like this real MBA, this massive bank account that everybody wants, that only comes from doing enough things well enough. It's like, do you know how to build a culture? Do you know how to galvanize people? Do you know how to hire the right people versus the wrong people? Most people, they'll make a mistake of hiring people that they feel like they can control, which means that they're trying to be the smartest person in the room. That is the absolute inverse of what you want. The smartest people surround themselves with way smarter people, but it's a lesson. There's like 1,000 of these lessons.
Kris, I got to know. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I got to know. Keith Cunningham talks about how there are business owners who don't know how to read a P&L, and they don't understand how they can bring in all this money, and they bring in more than their costs, and how come at the end of the day they don't get paid?
I got to tell you,
have you ever been in those shoes?
Most frustrating month of my life in business is several years ago, where we pulled out all the stops and we had a record-breaking month. We did like $650,000 of revenue because before we were doing about 300 grand. We had doubled our best revenue month, and I'm like, finally, we're not going to lose money, right? We were losing money at 300,000. For sure, we just, everyone bent over backwards, worked out these 120-hour weeks. We killed it this month. We doubled our revenue. Show me the profits. And guess what? We went even more negative.
No.
Even more negative. And I was like, pull freaking out my hair and my eyeball. Because I'm like, how can you double your revenue and literally double your loss? And I didn't understand accounting. I didn't understand because I didn't have my COGS, my cost of goods. I didn't have my COGS right. I also didn't have my margins right. And I assumed that more money and more financial revenue should equate to more profits. And boy, was I wrong. At some point, you're going to have to learn accounting. So here's the real lesson of the day. Can you be persistent and teachable to stay long enough in the game to survive your errors? Because if you can survive learning these 1,000 lessons, and by the way, there's some shortcuts we'll talk about today, but if you can, dude, then everything is yours. Like, I swear, why does it feel like Midas touch these days? Why does it feel like everything we do is working so well, Carson? Like business after business after business, we're winning, we're growing, we're excelling, we're exceeding. And, this year, I've got 9-figure aspirations. This year, I'm going to increase my net worth by 9 figures. That's over $100 million, folks. And I'm like, this is my biggest year in business yet. I'm on my way to hopefully becoming in the very near future here a billionaire. That's something I've wanted since January 15th, 2009, from the time that I declared it. And it turns out that it wasn't going to be possible until I learned enough lessons. And it seems now that our ability to make good decisions, certainly that outweighs indecision, but it's also the lack of bad decisions that is accelerating us right now.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of wonder if what Napoleon Hill is talking about is kind of the same thing as Ray Dalio, where you invest in 10 things, saying yes to 10 things. 9 of them might be bad, but that one good one far surpasses all the rest.
I would say it depends. Here's another error of business owners. It is human nature to produce or go after more of what you've gotten in the past because you've created a financial ceiling, a barometer. Like make it real simple. Don't talk business. Talk about someone that works at a job making, $60,000 a year. Is that person really setting their goals for the next year, saying, I'm going to double my income and make $120,000?
Probably
what
not.
boss in their right mind is going to double someone's income from one year to the next?
A dumb
It's
boss.
not unheard of, but you got to admit that would be rare. Instead, that person is like, well, maybe if I can get that, get a 6% raise. Maybe this year, maybe I can argue 7% inflation. Maybe I can get a bump to $64,000 this year. And so, most people are habituated already to want what they got before. And you have to break that cycle. You can't be a successful business owner without growth. Right? How boring. Same thing year in, year out. Most companies functioning on a 10% margin. That means you bring in $1 million, you keep $100,000. Some people says, well, that's really exciting, but how do you get that company to produce 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million? How do you increase the value of that company? If you don't know the answer to that question, how to increase the value of your company, then you're still missing a dire lesson that will help you grow your income and have your decisions outweigh indecision or bad decision.
So, interesting question for you. Do you learn anything from indecision? does a person learn when they have indecision?
Well, let's define what indecision is, because I'm about to give you some really weird, paradoxical advice. I paid $1 million to one of my mentors over a 7-year period of time. And that individual taught me, I mean, they were groundbreaking in leveling up my knowledge and understanding of business. And at one point they said, well, Kris, why are you making that decision? I said, well, because we need to make the decision. And he argued me. He says, but Kris, when does that decision need to be made? I'm like, well, we need to make it right now. I'm like, well, no. He said, when is the last possible moment that you have to make that decision? And I said, well, I mean, technically we don't need to make the decision for 3 weeks. He said, then why are you making it? I said, what? Like, you want me to procrastinate? He said, no, don't procrastinate. You can't make the decision for 3 more weeks. So why not give yourself, even though you think you know what you're deciding, why not give yourself 3 more weeks? And he taught me something really valuable. You should always use as much time as you have before you have to make a decision. That's not the same thing as procrastination or indecision. Indecision means that you've stared at the facts, the data, the information, the rationale, the logic, you've mulled it over, you've discussed it, you've debated it, and you just can't pull the trigger. That's a problem. You're stuck, you're dead in the water, you can't go anywhere. By the way, if you've ever been that person or been business partners with that person, like, you're killing your rainmaker. You can't, how are you supposed to grow if that is your MO? We are designed, the successful, the elite entrepreneur must learn how to make the best decisions in the time that they have to make a decision. And you should take as much time as you have, but then when you get to the drop dead moment of making a decision, pull the trigger with the best information, the best knowledge, and if you can't, you're screwed. And that doesn't guarantee you'll do it right, but you should take as much time as you need to do it the best.
Well, and that brings up something interesting, Kris, is I don't believe indecision, that nature abhors a vacuum. There's no such thing as really indecision. What happens is something else will come along and make the decision for you.
Well, and if nature abhors a vacuum and you're bringing up Redalio, it's not just asymmetric risk. I'm talking about standards. Mm-hmm. I remember when Tony Robbins, I was in this event with him years ago, and he brought up this idea that, well, what are your standards? And immediately my mind thought about my childhood, because I grew up in a religious, conservative family, and we talked about standards all the time when it came to dating, when it came to your choice in movies or music. I was raised with an upbringing that said, avoid explicit language, don't go to rated R movies. Those are called standards. So I always thought that standards were about kind of your moral compass and when you would say yes or when you would say no. But it became really apparent to me that standards are actually in every part of our life. We will get what we tolerate. Mm-hmm. And I asked myself, if I'm not growing in my business, as I was hearing Tony Robbins share this, I'm like, if I'm not happy with the level of growth, then that must mean I'm tolerating a standard that is beneath my privilege. And so all of a sudden I said, well, what are my standards? And I realized something. I always have these big, audacious revenue goals, but do I understand the activities that produce that? And am I increasing the standard on that activity? Am I asking the right thing of my people, or am I asking too little? At the end of the day, success in a business comes down to, it's a combination of having enough of the right standards that you enforce. Mm-hmm. And if you can't, like, for example, take sales. Most companies can identify with this. You've got someone in your company that's performing sales for you. In my company, we have inbound leads. We have prospects that are getting in touch with my company that want to get free game plans. They want to learn about how they can do real estate with me, or they want to learn about some of my business, options or investments that they can do with me. So they there's thousands of people every month that will filter down and talk to a group of people. I will have someone on my team and I'll say, great, I'm giving you 50 prospects that are interested in my company. That's how much I believe that you can handle. And so 2 years ago, what were they doing? They'd throw a text out, and if the person didn't text them back, they wouldn't even call them. How come I just feel like I burned that lead to the ground? I was pissed when I found that out. So I had to create standards. And the standard was, if I'm giving you 50 leads this week, and you got 50 leads last week, and some of them are disposition, so you always have an average of 70 leads, I expect you to make 100 calls a day or have a minimum of 3 hours of talk time a day. That's the standard. Once we impose that standard, and by the way, enforce that standard, guess what happened? We quadrupled our revenue. Why? Because without a standard, so you have to show people where the corner is, right? I mean, you've heard the story about the dad gives the brand new bike to his son, and he says, all right, listen, you're brand new with the bike, go anywhere you want, just don't go around the corner. Kid gets on the bike, figures it out, and boom, first thing he does is goes around the corner. Comes back 5 minutes later, so excited, joy on his face, and dad tears into him. Why did you go around the corner? And he just starts chewing out his boy. Finally, his boy is crying at this point, turns to dad and he says, Dad, what's a corner? Dad hadn't defined the corner. A standard is the minimum. Your people can't be rock stars. They can't be A players unless they know what the definition of that is. You should never employ someone without them understanding the standards they get to meet to be an A player on your team. Someone joins my sales team, I'll give a multi six-figure opportunity, but I got standards. $100 a day or 3 hours of talk time. And then there's a certain close ratio and et cetera that you need to have where you meet the standards of being worthy of being on my team. And if you don't, you get fired. Standards. If we don't have the right standards, how can you have the right people?
So, and I think this takes us to our wrap up. If someone is starting in business today and they had similar aspirations that you had, would you still tell them that bad decision is better than indecision?
Yeah, I would say fail fast and learn from every failure. It's not a failure if you learn. You're going to get paid in business and money or lessons. Worse is when you don't get paid either because you're hung up and stuck on the failure. There's a toughness. There's a level of toughness that the entrepreneur, thick skin that they have to be able to have. A weak person will take a business failure and interpret it as a mistake. A good business owner will take a failure and ask, what am I learning? Because if you learn enough lessons, you will survive your errors if you're persistent. And if you can survive your errors or what others would call your failures, then at that point, success becomes an inevitability. You've just learned too much of what works. Elon Musk, you really think SpaceX is going to fail? You really think that semi-truck self-driving vehicles is going to fail? You really think his brain implant, how crazy his neural implant is going to fail? Whether you think he's up in the night crazy with his projects, that man knows how to lead an effective team, how to assemble the correct team in the first place, how to establish a culture, how to create the buy-in. He's deploying his lessons and he's doing it at an accelerated rate. His first win was PayPal. PayPal of all things wasn't going to take a person to the moon. It was PayPal. Someone else had failed with it. He took it. He figured it out. He took his first major winnings and he went all in. By the way, there was a point when the man was almost going to go bankrupt. And I'm like, I bet he learned a lesson about the danger of all in. Did you set something aside for a rainy day or to make sure that you had a backup plan? But you can't fault him for his tenacity and his persistence.
For sure.
He survived enough of whatever early failures that man had so that now he just knows how to win. And that's true for a lot of the iconic business owners that we look at today is you have a certain amount of failing to do. The question is, are you learning from them? And are you persistent enough to stay in the game so that you can win? You must be a decision maker. But I also would balance that out and say, take as much time as you need before a decision must be made without procrastinating so that you can have as much success as you possibly can.